Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Grow Sessions, hosted by TSR and myself, Mark Doherty. Really excited today to bring in another gentleman from the Massachusetts market. And today, we're going to get the opportunity to talk about cultivation in Massachusetts, the market in general, craft cultivation, which is something that people know is something I'm passionate about and I love to talk about. So I hope Todd wants to talk about that as well. But love to introduce Todd Dahn, CannaLive Genetics out of Massachusetts. And Todd, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Mark, thank you so much for having me.
It's super exciting to talk to you. I looked a little bit, I think, we're probably friends on LinkedIn, connected on Instagrams and all that stuff. And so I've seen some of your stuff before. I actually saw a gentleman who I think took a tour of your facility. You're in kind of like one of the old mill buildings
Yeah,
out
we're
there,
in
right?
an old mill building in Holyoke. Yeah.
In Holyoke, great. Yeah. So, and that Holyoke area is kind of an epicenter of sorts, right, for cultivation. Like they were very cultivation friendly, if I remember. When the law started to change in Massachusetts, a lot of people set up in that area because you could get buildings, you could get space, they were friendly to it, things like that. So you ended up there, but I would
Well,
love for you to
not
just
only
give me
that,
the
but just
story.
to
Yeah.
throw in something, because there's another really big reason cultivation moved out here is
Yeah.
we're municipal power.
Okay.
So we're off the Eversource grid. So
Okay.
in Holyoke, we don't have a delivery fee.
Okay.
We just pay for the electricity. So it's like 2/3 of your bill gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of it was cheap real estate, but a lot of it for cultivation was definitely the fact that the power is like 40% cheaper than anywhere else in the state.
So just out of curiosity, so what does that mean like on a kilowatt hour basis? What are they paying in Holyoke?
Somebody else manages that for me, but I
Okay.
think we were down to 9 cents a kilowatt hour at
Okay.
maxing at 13. Like it was really, really cheap because
Yeah.
half to 56% of what they get is from a hydroelectric dam as well.
Hmm.
So the cost to create it is very cheap as well. So we don't have to pay high rates. And then there's no delivery charge, which anybody with a Massachusetts bill knows it's like 2/3 of your bill these
Right.
days. Huh.
Right. So a lot of reasons why that area was attractive for
Yeah.
indoor cultivation for sure. So how do we get here, right? Like where did you start? I'd love to hear your background. I've read a little bit, but I'd love to hear it from you. Kind
Yeah.
of, how did we get to this conversation today?
Um, Well, I mean, I guess two paths. I've been in the legacy market since 1986. I sold my first bag of weed when I was 13 years old. So I've been at it for quite some time, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? But I also spent close to 30 years in the music industry, helping independent artists create brands for themselves and compete against major labels for most of my life before I got into legal cannabis. So I was able to walk into this with an understanding of how commodities work in oversaturated markets and how to stand out. I mean, we work in urban music. There's a rapper on, every other house on the block, right? So
Yeah.
we really had to
Yeah.
work hard in that space to make sure that we stood out in an oversaturated market full of things that
Mhm.
look the same, but from a consumption standpoint are different. So
Mhm.
we really were excited to bring that over to cannabis.
Yeah, yeah. So that's super interesting that you have that experience in the music world and then it crosses over or you crossed over to cannabis, right? So there's like the legacy experience, the music world experience, and then this crossover into, this sort of quasi-legal state that we find ourselves in today, right? And you're not the only person I've heard have a similar set of experiences. What is it about the music industry that resonates or crosses over or makes people jump into this quasi-legal cannabis space?
Um, there's a lot of weed in the music industry, so there's a lot of synths, there's a lot of synergy there. But honestly, the music industry is a lot of people working for themselves. It's a lot of hustle. It's very unregulated. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
There's a lot
mhm.
of bending of the rules and gray areas. There's a lot of people who get in it because they think it's a get rich quick thing. Music sells itself, and then
Mm.
you're competing with people who don't understand how to move in the space.
Okay.
So there's a lot of similarities from that point, but also from a pure neurological standpoint, the dopamine and serotonin release that your brain gets from listening to your favorite music is really, really chemically similar, like high 80s, low 90s% to the release you get from cannabis. So your brain, from a chemical standpoint, is chasing the same thing. So if you're good at selling one, you'll be good at selling the other because at the end of the day, you're convincing people to get the same end result.
Man, that's fascinating. I've always thought that one of the things I find really interesting in the space is you've got people who have a certain appetite for risk. I've always thought about it as having an appetite for risk, right? So you've got the money to invest, the appetite for risk, some knowledge or some belief that you can be successful, and then, but to have it phrased the way you're saying it, where there's this like dopamine, this chemical reaction that's going on in the brain as well, right? That's an interesting way to look at it, because especially, we I don't know what the trajectory of the music industry is. I don't know the first thing about it. I'm a big music fan. Love, music, live music, lots of bands, seen lots of shows, but don't know the first thing about operating in that space. What I do know, though, is after, 15 years of operating in this space, where things started to open up state by state, and we started to, build our cultivation facilities and our retails and all that stuff, that, it's a roller coaster. It's been a roller coaster, the ups and downs, right? So those of us who've been in it for a while or wanted to get in, I guess that dopamine hit had to last, right? Even through the highs and the lows, right? We were still getting that fix, if you will, off of the excitement of the industry. You've certainly seen operating in, both gray market previous, and then now, this sort of more legalized market in Massachusetts, a lot of ups and downs. We were talking a little bit before we started the taping that, there's drama with the CCC. I used to do a lot of work with companies that were getting set up in Massachusetts. I feel like there's always been drama with the CCC in Massachusetts. Like, that's not a new thing, but how does that impact you as an operator, and or how do you see it impacting consumers? How does it impact the market in Mass?
Um, wow, okay, there's a couple layers of that. First, for us, we are the smallest cultivator in the state. We run 800 square feet of canopy in two 400 square foot rooms.
Mhm.
So the impact for us on some of these things is a lot larger than it is for other companies that can absorb some of these costs and things. But we can start with the poorly written regulations that don't have enough definition in them, that leave investigators up to kind of make their own set of sub rules depending on how they perceive the 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 regulations and security cameras, scales. I mean, there's a host of things where there's a lot of differences from facility to facility. So that makes
Mhm.
it really tough to plan. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's no way to really understand what you're going to be required to do because there's not enough specificity in the regulations. And I'll use this as a really good example. When perishable products are handled by the FDA, right, and they give you guidelines to, and I used to run restaurants and bars, which is how I know some of this stuff.
Okay.
You when you install a refrigerator to store food, they give you temperatures that you have to set it at. It has to be
Hmm.
within these temperature ranges, within these humidity ranges, because science says this is what keeps it fresh, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
None of that exists in the regulations here. They just say you have to store it in a safe manner. They don't give any specificity in it. So as we talk about this mold issue, which is one of these regulations that is problematic in the state, right?
Okay.
If a product leaves my facility clean, it's put into a hot ass truck for 8 hours a day. That's 100 degrees because it's 99 degrees outside, and they just run normal air conditioning, actual refrigeration to keep the product safe, right? Then it
Right.
gets put into a dispensary that runs a 90-degree vault.
Hmm.
There is no clear regulation defining how to store a product. So now you have products that could have left the manufacturer cultivator clean and now become problematic because the environment in which they're kept in creates the environment to create these problems. And now customers are buying problematic product, right?
Hmm.
So that's a really easy way to show how that affects everything, because the only person that now takes the blowback for that is the grower, not any of the people who stored
Right.
it improperly along the way.
Right. So you're saying that, product is being tested out at the facility, your total yeast and mold counts are within acceptable or de minimis ranges, and then it's packed, it goes along the supply chain, it hits transportation, the shipper, then the dispo, and it's sitting in the dispo for some period of time. That in that, right, there's no real chain of custody or directive around that. And so therefore,
Well,
that's where
there's
you're
chain of
picking up a hit. So
custody.
are they testing? Are they testing again, or are they testing product post like
So they're doing
purchase at the
shelf testing
dispensary?
right now, which is where the latest wave of all these problematic things came from, and
Hmm.
they try to blame the cultivator for what. And chain of custody is clear, right? The problem is that there's no storage
Right.
requirements in the regulations. So it's not a chain of custody thing, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on that, right? Chain of
Yeah.
custody is real clear, like metrics real good at that.
Yeah.
But when it leaves my facility where we store it at 60 degrees and 55% humidity and goes to another place that stores it at 90 degrees, 70% humidity, they are creating the environment that then creates growth on what, because I don't remediate, right? So there's always
Hmm.
something, right? Because
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
how live fucking things work, right?
Right. Right.
So when it gets in these environments that then creates the problem, there is no clear backtrack as to who is at fault because there's no definitive way to store things.
Okay.
So the
All
only
right.
thing they can do is blame the people that had a test saying that they passed.
So there's no opportunity to say, hey, we tested it here before it left my vault,
They
and then
don't
you
care.
tested it later, and therefore it happened in this middle point.
They don't care. They
Eh,
literally are just hanging cultivators out to dry.
that's brutal.
And
That's a hard
to
place to operate.
to make it even worse, right? Like let's really talk about what a problem mold is,
Okay.
right? From a scientific standpoint, not a fear mongering standpoint.
Yeah.
If mold was killing pot smokers, hippies would be piled up in the morgue for 50 fucking years.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There would be
Yeah.
NIH data pouring out of every pore of the NIH supporting all of these horrible things that they say happens.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
can look at the state of Massachusetts. We're within 0.5% of every respiratory disease national average. So
Hmm.
explain to me how we have a health crisis here just because the CCC decided to say so.
Okay. And is that what they're saying? Is that there's a
Yeah,
health crisis around
that
the
the
mold
cannabis industry is
and
dangerous
around
to
cannabis?
consumers and consumers should be careful and all
Hmm.
these things.
So what's really driving that, right? I mean, because the argument, I hear the argument, listen, this product was 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times worse previously. Who knows, right? And not only that, but it wasn't just total yeast and mold. It was like things like Eagle 20, right? That were
I
being
mean,
used
yeah,
rampantly and
people were
stuff like that.
spraying
Right,
pesticides,
spraying
all
all
kinds of
kinds
stuff.
of
Yeah.
deadly shit, right? That's going to turn into cyanide when you smoke it, and all that kind of stuff was rampant. Now it's not. This product is inherently safer. That is a very logical argument. So, what is the underlying driver today, especially when the market in Massachusetts is very large, right? It is a large cash producing, tax paying business industry in a state that isn't shy about taxing the hell out of everybody. That's the way of the Northeast, right? Very much so. I grew up in New York, so that's where I get that information from. But why today? Why today are they all of a sudden making this claim and trying to kind of put the screws to people?
It's a political position and they're vying for their next job.
Hmm.
They've been labeled as incompetent for years, so they're trying to create things that they could seem like they're winning at.
Yeah, yeah. And so what how do they win at that though? Like they force
Because
everybody
in
to do
public
what?
perception, they're like, oh, we took all this bad weed off. So look, we're doing something, right? But there is
Ah,
no underlying health risk that they're actually addressing. They're
mm-hmm.
just puffing up for the cameras saying they did all this stuff. But
Yeah,
one of the things the FDA requires in a food recall is they have to be linked to health issues. They have to say this person, this person, this person, this person all had this health issue from this, right?
sure.
Otherwise, you're being irresponsible in the accusation. And there's none of that data. They're just making accusations.
Mm, mm. So for you, you said you're running 800 square feet of flower canopy, two 400 square foot canopy rooms. That is very small. You're very on the small side, right? So the smallest in the state. So if you get popped with a recall like that,
I would shut us down.
that would be,
Yeah,
yeah,
100%. And
horrific.
we ship everything clean from here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, but there's no accountability for anyone else that holds possession of it once it leaves here.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you as a small player in that space protect yourself? Like working, like I would think like I'd want to work with transporters only if they can show me that they're running vans with reefer units or, proper controls on their vans and their transportation and their moving of the product. I'd want to work with dispensary owners that have vaults that are properly outfitted with HVAC and dehumidification, just like I would do a vault at the grow. Are you looking at that? Is that even feasible for somebody of your size to only work with people that can handle your product the right way?
Well, we only work with people for a variety of reasons, including the way that we market and the way that we work grant programs and all these other things into what we
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
for me, it's not a hard conversation to have. Ask somebody about their vault, ask for a tour of the store.
Hmm.
Um, for me, with the transport company that we use, I know the people that run it, so I know that their vault is proper and their truck is as cool as the truck is going to be. So I'm pretty comfortable in that. But as we grow, and we're small enough to be able to make choices with people that we deal with now. I only harvest maybe 40, 45 pounds total every harvest.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
really simple. But as we grow and get bigger, it's not going to be as easy to just say these are the three pieces of criteria everybody must jump through, right? Like we're going to need to find more stores for
Hmm.
product to land into. And until there's better regulations to make things safer, right? Cultivators and manufacturers are putting themselves at risk, continually putting products in the market that they could just be held responsible for when it's not their, they didn't cause the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think it's really important though, and I appreciate you like sharing this information because I think anybody who's in that market or in markets where they might be dealing with something similar, you know, they've got to look at how to protect themselves, right? And they've got to look at how, well, how do we continue to operate in this space? Because it's not the first time the market, the regulators, the industry, whatever, has thrown a curveball, or for that matter, you know, launched a pitch straight at our heads in this space, right? And so we're constantly dealing with this. We're constantly dealing with this sort of turmoil and churn and stuff like that. So hearing in real time, hey, this is what we're dealing with, this is how we're dealing with it, this is what we're thinking. But you mentioned like, okay, as we get bigger, so being the size that you are feels intentional.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Um,
And so how did you look at that when you said, all right, I'm gonna set up shop here? How did you look at that intentionality of size? And what does it mean for you to be that size and why? And then like what you talked about as we get bigger, what does that look like? What does that mean?
so when we started back in 2020, I pivoted into legal cannabis when the pandemic hit and touring stopped. So most of what I did in the music industry kind of dried up.
Yeah.
So we made the pivot through that. We were originally looking at about 13,000 square feet with about 4,500 square feet of canopy. And within
Hmm.
about 6 months of going through the process, we shrunk down to this because I looked at California and Colorado as blueprints for what I think could happen in the market adjusted with the way Massachusetts works. We're so small, our money is more focused and more concentrated, so we have more people willing to overpay in certain points. And I'm never worried about prices going down to $600 everywhere a pound and things like that that have happened in other states, right?
Hmm.
But I was able to kind of loosely track a trajectory as to where I thought wholesale was going to end up. And we
Hmm.
weren't going to be able to employ a bunch of people in the beginning and build a facility because we just couldn't. I'm bootstrapped, right? So like I paid for this out of my pockets, a couple loans from some friends. Like we don't have, a multi-state operator behind us or a bunch of money or
Hmm.
anything. So we had to
Hmm.
look at what was the most efficient for what we were doing. So when we scaled down to this, it was for two reasons. One, me and one other person can run this whole facility.
Yeah.
So me and my business partner, me and a volunteer, me and my salesperson, we can get in and knock out most of the things that need to be done efficiently enough that we're not that our product will always be consistent, right? I could
Hmm.
probably use
Hmm.
two more people for sure, but
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? But it was important because, well, I won't say that we're profitable because that's a really tricky word. We've been cash positive for a while and
Okay.
able to start servicing all of the debt that we accrued in the almost 4 years it took us to come to market, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
the process here, especially at that point from 2020 to 2022, took almost 2.5 years to get
Hmm.
everything really done to the point that we could start construction, and then construction was another year. So
Hmm.
we wanted to make sure that at least we were able to service the things that we were doing. And then as proof of concept came out and we grow custom strains. So we did all my own genetics in the legacy markets. We brought those here.
Hmm.
We market through community activations. I don't have a website. I don't care about email blasts. Like we do things very differently. So I
Okay.
needed a proof of concept for that. And we'll talk about that for sure. But I knew
Yeah.
coming into the marketplace, I had to prove the concept before people were really going to jump on board for it.
Hmm.
So and then thirdly, I was terrified of metric. As I really started learning some
Hmm.
of the compliance that we had to go with, it really
Hmm.
felt smarter to be small because again, I don't have a compliance person. It's me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the smaller it was, the easier it was for me to have a grasp on everything. And
Hmm.
then I
Hmm.
was able to start adding more layers of complexity and new products and all those things after I was comfortable with the framework of the compliance in which we had to operate in the first place.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So then so how long have you been up and growing and selling product into the marketplace?
We started growing in, what is this, 2025? So we got our commenced to sell product at NECANN 2024.
Okay.
And we planted plants like September 23.
Okay. All right. So like when's Nikan usually, like April? Isn't it in the spring in
March, like
Boston? March?
mid-March. Yeah,
March,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. God, I remember back in the day when it first started and it was in April. There is when spring is nice in Boston, there is no more beautiful city.
Yeah.
I remember back in those days when we go to Nikan in April, and it would be just glorious walking around. Especially that area of town is really beautiful and fun. So you get in, you say, okay, there's all these constraints. I'm bootstrapped, right? I'm not going to go out and take all this onerous, outside data, read or whatever that some of these peers are doing when they're trying to be bigger, right? Out of the gate. So you start small out of the gate. Like you said, proof of concept, you're doing things differently. Definitely want to hear more about how you're doing things differently. Um, but then you mentioned as we grow. So here you are today. Where are you? What is the growth? Is there growth from here, or is it no, we're going to keep it small, we're going to keep what we're doing and keep doing it this way?
So we're working through some investment situations or possibilities right now, right, to increase canopy size a little bit, add some retail to it.
Hmm.
But we're a micro business license here in Massachusetts, and I got that because I want to do social consumption because I have a different understanding of hospitality, having run restaurants and bars
Yeah,
than a lot of my peers, and can see a
sure.
clear path to printing money through social consumption.
Okay.
So and also the outside of that, the social responsibility that social consumption brings in, considering
Hmm.
people who live in federal housing can't consume their medicine. A lot of people, it's a lot of apartments here in Massachusetts, Boston area especially, right? So a lot of people's landlords won't let them consume, and now we're putting people on the
Mm.
street for the police to harass because we're not a open consumption state or one of the few
Mm.
rec states that it isn't legal to consume in public.
Right. Okay.
So we create all these opportunities for police to harass people of color and women and folks that they're
Mhm.
already harassing to begin with. We don't need to give them more reason to go and give them interaction points. So people
Yeah.
deserve a safe place to consume their medicine first and foremost, right? But
Yep.
also like to just have fun because they give enough of the drunks that space. They might as well help people who don't
Yeah.
flip cars over when a sports team wins a championship.
Yeah. 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 Pretty rarely if people gotten so high on their favorite cannabis product that they're out there lighting fires and flipping cars. I mean, just not
Yeah.
not in my experience. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
somebody's had
maybe.
a different experience, but not typically in my experience. So, it's super interesting. I mean, one thing I want to ask you before I ask you this other thing is, so you mentioned strains that you brought over with you that you brought in. What strains right now are you hot on? Like what's hot? What are you excited about as the grower, as the operator, not necessarily as the shelf space, give me 400% THC on some bullshit COA crap, right? But like what are you hot on now? Like and why? Like is it the nose? Is it the terps? Like what is it?
I'm always an effect-based smoker.
Hmm.
Cannabis has been medicine for me since I was a kid. I have extreme anxiety and some other things. I'm gay, right? Growing up gay in the 70s and 80s was very different than it was now. And it was a lot harder. And I'm very happy the kids have the support they have now. Nobody should go through what we went through back then.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's always been effect for me first because that's what has been important in my life. So I look for things that are consistent in effect and deliver effects that I enjoy. It's one of the reasons that our products are the way they are because when I built them for reasons. We
Okay.
have 5 strains in the market right now. Gold Leaf was the one I built for myself. It's a good lemony mercenary mix with a high anti-anxiety and a lot of focus to it.
Okay.
We've got Gold to Sleep, which my ex-husband was an insomniac. So when he couldn't sleep, he liked to make sure that I was sleeping, right? So what are you
Okay.
doing? What are you doing? So me and my buddy literally built a strain that would just put him to sleep. It's really heavy, carafenylethylene or however you say it, chlorphylline, I
Yeah.
think it is, right?
Counseling. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so literally it just knocks you out. But it's a
Hmm.
19% tester because when we
Okay.
built those things, like nobody gave a damn about those numbers. We cared about the effect, right?
Hmm.
So it's an interesting sell to people, but once they try it, they come back and say, yeah, it does exactly what you said it's going
Hmm.
to do, and we're going to keep working with it, right? Our
Okay.
Grizzly Goo has 1% THCV in flower, right? So we're really happy with that. It's got a nice body high, but it keeps you moving.
Hmm.
Blazeberry is almost all mercenine. We built that for people in the studio. So when people can be creative and energetic, this really helped them get going instead of smoking a bunch of shit that put them in the couch and then couldn't work,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And then Zofredo, the last one we just brought to market, is our first real hybrid. That one's got a really nice body height to it, but it gives you a nice good head boost as well. So
Okay.
we want to make sure that we put effects in front of people that help them,
Yeah.
because if you talk to anybody, even if they're like, why do you smoke? Well, I smoke indica. Yeah, but
Yeah.
why? Like, do you like the appetite? Do you like to relax? If you really talk to people, everybody uses it for medicine. A lot of people just
Mhm.
don't really understand because it's not a way that they framed it in their head before. So
Yeah.
we try
Yeah.
to work with folks that way to make sure that we're giving them something that gives them what they need, so that I'm not worried about numbers or any of that other stuff. Like we're giving them the thing that they need, and they'll come back and get it from us.
Yeah. Yeah. Cannabis is medicine regardless of what the state wants to call it. Right.
100%.
I always say, like, if I wake up in the morning and I have a headache and take 2 Advil, I'm not taking them recreationally.
Yeah.
Right. I'm an adult that's capable of taking care of myself in that regard and deciding what feels good and what doesn't in my body. So, with that being said, I think it's super interesting because I remember in the early days when I was doing a lot of work around like applying for state licenses, and competitive bid markets, and they were all medical at the time. And there was a lot of like, you know, sort of propping up yourself in these application processes, like, we're gonna be the most medical market in the history of medicine. And at the same time, you weren't allowed to make any claims. You weren't
Right.
allowed to actually say anything that would indicate what does this strain typically do versus that strain? What are we experiencing, right? And so in today's market, when you're doing such a tailored genetic strategy, right? And your own in-house tailoring of those genetics, how do you communicate that to the market? How do people know what they're getting, or how do people know to even go into a dispensary with not a problem, but with something that we could solve with a particular genetic, right? Or something that a particular genetic might support. How do they even know to ask the questions?
Well, for us, a lot of the work that we do is through community building,
Yeah.
right? So every one of the strains that we put out gives a grant to an artist or an organization in the Massachusetts market that already has a formed community that they support, and they just need
Mhm.
financial support to hit a new milestone.
Okay.
So Gold Leaf and Goldless Leaf give a grant to Still Gold, which is the largest live hip hop band in all of New England.
What are
Our
they called? Say that again.
Still Gold,
Okay.
STLGLD.
Okay.
Our last festival last summer had about 7,000 people come out to it. They've been in the market for a long time. Um, their fan base is a lot of cannabis consumers, so we're able to utilize them to talk to their people about what we offer. And the only thing you can't do is in a dispensary say these things. I can go out in the
Right.
street and say anything I want to, right? Dispensaries just can't
For
make these
now.
claims. Yeah. Well, yeah. When that's a topic for a whole nother
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a
podcast.
different podcast.
But we're out. So like that grant works there. Blazeberry gives a grant to Brandy Blaze, who's an artist and an activist in the area. And we're really proud of this because this grant was actually the last piece for her to quit her day job and do art full time for a living. Right.
Okay, cool.
Mash Bears and Cubs, which is an LGBTQ nonprofit that promotes body positivity in the gay community and does
Okay.
5 or 6 monthly events every month, and works with making sure that plus size gay men have a space. They get a grant from our Grizzly Goo. So every month we're in front of 4, 5, 600 people through them for their events. And we're really
Uh-huh.
just using that community experience. Zofredo gives a grant to Dutch Rebel, who's been an artist here for 15 years. Her
Mhm.
family runs a nonprofit that runs a school in Haiti. So we're able to really make sure that we're working
Mhm.
with people to make sure that communities are getting the things that they need through these grants that we can help other people with, right? And that in turns gives us access to all of the people that they deal with as a customer base. So
Mhm.
when Dutch comes to Rooted In and says, I'm doing a jar signing, and 22 people come down and buy products, right? We're able to create these experiences where people want the product, and once they feel it, they come back to that experience. But
Sure.
outside of the dispensary, I can sit in front of people and say, this is the feeling, this is what you're going to do, because I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just telling you what my product feels like.
Yeah, you're just sharing your experience. I
Yeah.
mean, the community piece of it is really interesting. I think that so much of the focus ends up being on, like, at the bud tender level, store activations, very traditional retail type efforts, and you're keeping it in the community, and especially in the artistic space, it sounds like. And so, you had mentioned earlier, like, hey, we do things a little bit differently. I mean, so we just touched on a couple of things. Well, we've touched on a few things, right? The size you decided to start out at in terms of canopy size, very different than your peers getting into this industry, right? Everybody else went as big as they could, right? They tried to
Yep.
max out the license caps right out of the gate for the most part. You know, the locality, the hyper local focus, you know, the supportive local, right? You're approaching your genetics it sounds very unique as well. Not just shooting for that like, you know, absurd THC number that people are hunting so fervently right now, but really focusing in on, you know, cannabinoid full plant expression. How does this impact the mind, the body, the soul? You know, this plant is medicine focused, right? So what else are you doing? I'm curious. What else are you doing that you think is, or not that you think, but that you feel is different and sets you apart?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just we continue the community experience even to the store. Like I learned through music that fan clubs are what make musicians wealthy, right? Like you have to have some sort of emotional hook into
Okay.
somebody. And
Yeah.
marketing is nothing more than psychological manipulation. People like to
Yeah.
use all these fancy words in cannabis about marketing and think SEO is marketing and all this other nonsense. It's not. Marketing is the seeding of identity hooks, the identity seeds that are seeded in people and pushing those emotional buttons to get them to do what you want, right?
Yeah.
So I want to do that in the most authentic way possible because that seeds the most deeply seated identity, right? So I worked in music, urban music for 30 years. So we authentically activate that space and work within those folks. So big old gay dudes. So we authentically sit in
Yeah.
those spaces and there's enough community there.
Yeah.
You know, I work with women throughout my entire career. So there's enough community there to really go out and give support that everybody else ignores, right? That now we can make them feel just as special as everybody else feels. And that gives them a desire to want to do things to help us. But even when we go into stores, like for example, when Brandy does pop-ups, Brandy and I also have a makeup company called Fire for women of color.
Okay.
So we'll bring a makeup artist into the dispensary with us and do 15-minute makeovers for everybody that buys our product during those 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the first time we did that at Rooted In over here in Boston, we did 7 makeovers in 2 hours, including a trans woman who had never had professional makeup done before, right?
Okay.
So the community touch out of those 7 people, the people they went and told, the social media posts that they made, all of
Mm-hmm.
that, you can't buy that. You have to give an experience to where somebody walks away from that feeling better about you.
Yeah.
So I don't really care to do these pop-ups where I talk to people about how much they enjoy weed or anything, because everybody does that and it feels like a fucking Footlocker at this point. Like they're clearly there to buy weed. We want them to walk in and have a new experience. Is there a
Yeah.
DJ playing that's playing a song they haven't heard in a while? Is there a
Yeah.
jazz musician playing some saxophone shit? Is there holiday chorus singing Christmas carols? Like all the different things we do. We do puppy adoptions. We do all different kinds of things. Because even
Mm-hmm.
if you've pre-ordered, I've changed your experience, so you're going to remember
Mm-hmm.
who we are, right? You're going to walk
Mm-hmm.
out saying, "Damn, maybe next time I'll try these guys because this was really cool." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then when somebody does come over to talk to us, it's from a standpoint of them wanting to know what's going on, not me hoping I can steal 30 seconds from them when they're already on a mission, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
changes the power balance and the way the conversation happens, and we're able to actually leave them with a desire to do something with us as opposed to just feeling inconvenienced
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't feel like spinning a wheel at that moment. You know, they could be having the
Yeah.
worst day
Yeah.
of their life, right? And I'm sitting there talking about, hey, you want 10% off, right? Like,
Right.
but if they're having the worst day of their life and they walk in and they hear some house music that puts them in a good mood, or they're a huge fan of jazz and, you know, we've got Tim in there playing the saxophone or whatever the case may be, we've now changed their day, right? Which is
Right.
completely different. And now you've seeded this identity that I'm capable of doing that for them and they'll come to look for us to do it the next time.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to this, like what I'm kind of hearing is like you take your love, your passion, your personality, and that is the marketing. It's like you, right? It's like you, and you're the leader of the company, you're the head of the company, you're wearing so many hats, but then you're taking what you're passionate about, your love, right, and using that to connect with the community, right?
Yeah.
And so is that something that you think is possible as companies get larger? Can they still operate? Could they do that, right? Because
Yeah.
not a lot of them, arguably, right? Most of them are spinning the wheel for 10% if they're lucky, right? So is that something that larger companies can do? Can they learn from you and implement that type of passion level marketing, that type of love level marketing, that community level marketing, or does it need to be small and the CEO is also the head grower and also the janitor and also the marketer kind of vibe?
Um, as we grow, we're going to keep the same vibe. Like the mission is the same. You know what I mean? We're just going to make more money to do more missions, right? Give out more grants, create more community engagement, support more things. So I feel like it's really dependent on why the whoever's in charge. Right? I call myself the chief debt holder because calling myself CEO
Yeah,
sounds really weird when it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
me,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
whoever's in charge, what was their reason for getting in it, right? I
yeah.
don't have any children. I'm 53 years old. My legacy is more important than my bank account. So
Mhm.
I'm in it because I want to do these things to do right by the revenue that we can generate.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for our company, that will never change because I'm not, as a person, that's who I am. So that's always going to
Hmm.
be how I step forward, right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't speak to why other people open their companies and why they do some of the things that they do. But I also feel like I come from a really unique experience of running restaurants and bars and all these other things where I have enough failures in my life to
Hmm.
not be scared by a challenge.
Hmm.
So this price compression that is mostly artificially inflated by dispensaries that don't know how to compete with each other, thinking the only thing they can do is drop prices, wouldn't be
Hmm.
happening if more people had actually a background that they needed to run a dispensary instead of just thinking, oh, I did this and weed sells itself, so I'm just going to open a
Yeah,
dispensary.
yeah. So it's interesting. You mentioned the background in the restaurants and stuff, and I too have a background. I spent a number of years working in restaurants, managing restaurants, and doing all that type of thing. And one of the challenges that I see with the social consumption lounge model is if you go in and you roast a couple of I always say like, you roast a bowl or you smoke a joint. I guess the kids today don't do that. I don't really know, but I'm not hip enough to know how to even use the terminology that would be appropriate. Um, Dabs, whatever. You go in there, you take a couple of dabs. You're not buying more shit like for the rest of the night. You're kind of like that's my fear with that lounge model. Now, I will tell you, there's a New York state, and I don't know how it works in Massachusetts, the licensing per se, but I know in New York there is a license that they've given out where you can do like 5,000 square feet of flower canopy, um, processing or a retail and like a lounge, a consumption all on the same site. And that I find really interesting from an economic standpoint. But anyway, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the social consumption model. How does it work? And how can you make it work? What do you see?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had the MCC, our state association. I had the social consumption group there. I've been very involved in getting the regulations passed and working with Stebbins and Carmago and now Roy on making sure that these things kind of make sense for us. Um,
Okay.
there's first thing we have to do is the easiest way to explain this and equate it to people is explain it in the terms of bars, right? Because social
Mhm.
consumption and bars are going to be very similar in terms of how vice is consumed.
Mm,
Bars only work if you can sell liquor.
right.
Nobody's bringing a six pack into a bar and then sitting there and leaving, right? So the whole there's no cannabis sold on the premises can't even be part of the conversation, right? It has to be
Mhm.
something where cannabis
Mhm.
is sold and people consume it there. But
Yep.
then it's up to you to create an environment that they want to stay, right? And I'll explain to you what we're going to do, and I'll give you some and while doing that, I'll explain kind of the answer to your question, right?
Okay.
We're looking to do about 50,000 square feet. I'm going to do so in my experience in hospitality.
Mhm.
Cannabis works with a lot of businesses that just can't have cannabis inside of it. You go to a restaurant, you go outside to smoke, you go back in and eat more. You go to a
Yeah.
concert, you go outside and smoke, or you find venues that let you smoke in. You go to a
Right.
bar, you right. So there's all these things that people do and go out and smoke with anyways. So we take those concepts because they already make money, right? They're already
Hmm.
profitable as a business model, and we just apply cannabis to them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So our venue is going to have two live music rooms, one with
Hmm.
150 person capacity, one with 250 person capacity. They'll
Hmm.
be booked 7 nights of the week. I'm not even worried about that. I've already spoken
Hmm.
with record labels that want to buy them out, and I know the Massachusetts music market. So that's
Okay.
400 people a day, every day. We're going to do a
Okay.
pool hall with pool tables and dartboards with corresponding intermediate, advanced, and beginner leagues. So there's another block of people that have a reason to spend several hours there every time they come to visit. We're gonna have 2 private rooms for weddings, corporate parties, those kinds of things that come with a room rental and packages and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
A vast majority of it is going to be a Dave and Buster style room with adult video games,
Mm-hmm.
TV screens, set up like a sports bar with sports gambling inside. So you'll be
Mm.
able to bet on the sports. So
Okay.
that'll take up about 2/3 of the space, and that'll all be combustion friendly. So we're
Okay.
gonna have another portion that you can't combust in for people who don't want to be around the smoke or they just want to
Mm.
kind of chill. And that's gonna have a library in it that gets newspapers from all over the world delivered so that all the cultures in the Boston community have some sort of tie to home when they come in and visit. We're also
Okay.
going to put 3 businesses there that we consider social equity businesses. That will be a juice shop that does fresh juice, a homemade
Mm-hmm.
ice cream shop, and a coffee shop that does some sort of unique coffee because I don't want my
Mm-hmm.
kitchen doing that. And they'll be
Mm-hmm.
there rent free for 3 years so that they can build a brand for themselves and go out to do whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And since Massachusetts was too lazy to come up with actual guidelines on how to use cannabis and they just adopted the food safety guidelines, legally
Mm-hmm.
every dispensary is a restaurant without a kitchen because you're
Okay.
following food safety guidelines. So I'm going to
Okay.
slap a kitchen in there and I can serve food through the whole thing, everything from sushi and high-end steaks down to bar food.
Okay.
So every business model, the money that it generates outside of cannabis will generate enough money to pay for the staff that runs it and any
Mm-hmm.
taxes that are accrued from that revenue. So all of
Mm-hmm.
that covers the cogs of running that business model, and the cannabis revenue can exist from an accounting standpoint, right outside of that and in a more profitable space.
Right.
But you can't just
Okay.
throw people into a room and say, smoke weed and stay here all day. Just like in a restaurant or a bar and anything else, you have to create environments in which people want to spend time. But
Mm-hmm.
Boston's a
Mm-hmm.
huge sports town. If I open a weed sports bar, do you know how packed we're
Mm-hmm.
going to be every
Mm-hmm.
fucking Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, Thursday? You know what I mean? Like there's a sports game every night of the year almost here in Boston.
So is that like what I've seen in some of the other regulations in some of the other states that I've looked at for one reason or another is that the combining of the different businesses wasn't allowed, right?
Well,
So
so
yes, you could sell cannabis and consume cannabis on site, but you couldn't sell food and consume food
oh,
on
we
site
can do all that.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
You can do all of that. So
Yeah.
under the way it's written currently, you can do all that. Even
Yep.
even the sports book,
Yeah. Because
even the
Commissioner
sports book.
Stebbins sat on the gaming commission when they passed sports betting. And I had a
Okay.
meeting with them specifically, and there's nothing in their regulations that says no, and there's nothing in the
Okay.
cannabis regulations that say no. It's just the
Okay.
$5 million to go out and get it, right?
Oh, okay. Just the
So
5 million? That's
yeah,
it? Yeah. Yeah.
considering it prints
Uh,
about $30 million a year, yeah, that's it.
yeah. And would you be able to serve would you be able to get an alcohol license as well, liquor license as well, or no, they
No,
won't let that
and
cross
even if you
over.
could, I'm not interested in that because I don't deal with
Okay.
drunk people anymore. I've
Okay.
done that
Okay.
before, and I don't have any
Yeah.
interest in combining the two.
Okay.
Because when you talk about safety, the last thing I want to do is take somebody's grandmother, feed them a margarita and a fucking edible, and then hope that everything goes for the best,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I find that to be incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah. 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 No,
I've
I
also
love it.
run bars and I won't deal with drunk people anymore. It's
Yeah,
just
no,
not,
I
it's
mean,
not worth
listen,
the
I
money.
had my fill of it as well. I'll never forget the last I was managing a restaurant. There were a lot of managers. I wasn't the only one. It was a big restaurant, big op, and so I'm one of like 5 or 6. And it was one of these restaurants where it was like uh, fast service, but upper end kind of Italian service type of place, and a lot of grilled steaks going out and things like that. So it was expected that as managers, if you could also cook. So I came from a background working behind the line, and so if you could cook, you would be back there expoing during the busy peak, or you'd be on the grill or whatever. Like you'd be filling in on the line basically to get them through the push. And so, you have to go back there, get through the push for like 3 hours. You had to put your suit back on and come back out front, which I hated because you
You're
smelled,
sweaty and
you're
greasy. Yeah,
sweaty, you're
yeah.
greasy, you're nasty. Let me stay in the back. I'll wash dishes. I don't care. Right. So I come back out front and I hear in the headset that there's a problem at the bar. I go over to the bar and we got to escort this drunk guy out. And he's being an asshole. The person with him is screaming and yelling, creating a fuss. And I think the next day went back in and met with the owners and just said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I have zero
Yeah.
desire, zero passion, to do this. Yeah, so I get it, man. I get it, not wanting to mix the two. I think it's interesting from a standpoint of, yes, if, you know, cannabis is an enhancement to these other revenue streams that exist within these four walls of this business called a consumption lounge, then yeah, then it works. And so I think that that's great that the laws allow for that. So is that the next thing? Is getting that business up and running kind of where you're focused, where you're headed, where the time's being spent? Is it on getting the grow bigger? Is it both? What are you looking at? What's the
Right now,
opportunity right now in Massachusetts?
social consumption still a ways off. We're still getting the regulations promulgated, which will probably happen December-ish at this point now. It looks like maybe January, right? And then they have to
Okay,
create the
okay.
application process. So I would
Mhm.
expect like maybe next summer, next fall, we'll be able to start applying for them. And
Yeah.
then they're promising us a faster process than before, but we'll kind of see. But right now, they're also talking about redesigning the CCC on a state level, right? So there's a
Mhm,
lot
mhm.
of unknowns and all of that as to how this is going to play out. So we're really looking right now at adding some retail, maybe a store or two, right? And
Okay,
potentially increasing the canopy size to go along with that, as we'll have a throughput space of our own, as well as what we're doing on the wholesale market.
okay. And so, with the consumption lounge idea, right? I mean, what do you think about like in other states? I do love the idea. There's a piece of me that finds it very romantic, this idea of having, a small amount of canopy, your own retail, your own consumption lounge, co-located one space. Is that kind of the sexy idea? Is that everything's kind of co-located, or are you looking at separate buildings, separate, areas? And I don't know. I know years ago coming across 50,000 square feet in the Holyoke area wasn't all that hard because there was a lot of empty buildings. There was a lot of underutilized space there. Is
Well, we
that where
won't
you
do
want to be, or you
consumption
want to
in
be in
Holyoke.
Boston?
We're going to do consumption in Somerville. And
Okay,
there's a company building 2 million square feet of commercial space over the next 5 years as the Union
got it.
Square expansion happens, which
Got
is
it.
a young, hip neighborhood. And they're
Yeah.
putting like 4,000 apartments and a hotel and all these things in with it. So we've been in loose talks with them a little bit about getting over there, but we need the
Hmm.
regulations to move forward before we can really have actual conversations with people.
Okay.
But I really feel like I don't know, like a lot of people feel really badly about our market right now, right? And if you look at
Hmm.
restaurants or anything else, there's always market correction for people who shouldn't be in it, right? There's always market correction for badly run businesses. Now's a great time to
Hmm.
be out buying things because there's a lot of great locations that just weren't run right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're there for people, and everybody that survives this part will do well in the next phase. And that's why like we're looking at stores because vertical integration is really
Hmm.
important for actually creating profit through the things that you make because you're not constrained
Hmm.
by the microeconomics of each town in Massachusetts. You can create the value that you have in the store for
Hmm.
what people are doing.
Yeah. And is that what you see is right now, there's distressed asset opportunities
There's a
within
lot of them.
within the
Yeah.
state. I mean, there is nationally, but there's distressed asset opportunities. And so you are looking at those saying, okay, how do we become vertically integrated? How do we increase our margin or our contribution here to the bottom line? And this distressed asset piece of the puzzle or phase that we're in right now, this correction that we're in right now, that offers you opportunities. That's what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. You know what I mean? And especially with the license cap going up to 6, which a lot of people, some people complain about, I think is a good thing. Like you can't,
Hmm.
for some reason, they decided to pitch this business like tech companies and thinking that they're going to have exits, right? Which is
Hmm.
insane. This should be family companies, you know what I mean? But if you're going to pitch exits, you've got to give companies the ability to be healthy enough to buy things.
Yeah.
So having multiple stores and creating the revenue to buy other stores, like that's the only
Yeah.
reason it's going to happen. No MSO is coming back to Massachusetts and buying 6 stores because the margins just aren't there for them. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
But we have healthy companies here that could buy a fourth store. You know what I
Okay.
mean? That would give somebody an exit or at least get somebody out from the debt that they're carrying, right?
Right.
Because I
Right.
mean, we're still struggling. You know what I mean? Like I don't want it to make it seem like we're floating on clouds over here. Like we're struggling month to month because of our size and the debt that we carry. But
Yeah.
through knowing that we've created what we were able to on our own, as we
Hmm.
scale, we can
Hmm.
show where the opportunity comes from.
Okay. All right. So when you look at a market, a lot of times we look at, wholesale value of a pound, of a gram, of whatever, right? However we want to measure that as being the sort of modeling of a healthy market versus not, right? And I remember back when adult use first happened in Massachusetts, and there were like 12 license holders, and they all owned their own 2 or 3 dispensaries. They were selling just to themselves. There was no wholesale. It was like 7 grand a pound, right? Something like that and people were just going nuts, going crazy. Nowadays, if we have a market that's holding steady at 2, people are thrilled, right? We have other markets that are crashing out to where, 5, 6, 7 a pound. And if it gets below 5, oftentimes that's where we see a lot of licenses just turn the lights off. What are you seeing in Massachusetts today? And what's the difference between what you're growing, this very sort of what I would call craft, almost boutique cannabis lines versus more of your, mid-market, mid-tier type products?
I think so Massachusetts is unique because it's so small and there's so much money here that the economics are different than a lot of other states. And there's
Yeah.
high concentrations of people that receive identity by overpaying for things and being able to say, look, I bought this expensive thing, right?
Well,
And people don't really understand the economics of that here, unfortunately, in cannabis. So they don't keep enough value prop for themselves to sit in that space. But you also have to look at the way the towns are situated because, like, I lived in Chicago for 25 years before I came here. Chicago's
mm-hmm.
27 miles from tip to tip, right?
Mm-hmm.
My neighborhood, Andersonville in Chicago, had 80,000 people in it. The town of
Yeah.
Somerville has 80,000 people in it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
everything is so geographically splintered here because it's towns. A lot of people like don't really leave their little town. So you have
Mm-hmm.
these microeconomics that you have to deal with. But all that being said, if you bring a good product to market and you give people a reason to get it, we still get $15 to $17 an eighth wholesale,
Mm-hmm.
right? We still get
Mm-hmm.
$4.50, $5 a gram for pre-rolls,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because and I know that there's an AR issue in the state. We don't have one. We have a need to sell more issue, right? But I put out 205 invoices, 204 have been paid,
Okay.
right? Everybody
Yeah.
pays me. Not everybody pays on time, right? Sometimes it's a little late here or there, but
Yeah.
everybody pays. And that's part of our community building is we become something that the store doesn't want to do without because we
Mm-hmm.
help them do other things that then make them more valuable to the community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of that builds into what you can charge for your stuff. Like we don't have my highest testing thing tests at like 28%. We don't
Okay.
have 35, 38 percenters. I'm not
Right.
interested in devaluing other pieces of the plant to get to that point. The only people that I'm jealous of that grow at that level is Tower 3 here because they have
Okay.
great, phenomenal high testing stuff that they breed in house and do really great things with.
Yeah.
But it's all in the value prop that you bring to people. If you just want, and that's what a lot of brands here do, they don't understand how to bring a value prop other than, well, I have weed. Well, so does everybody
Mm-hmm.
else. Like, what else are you going to do? Are you doing
Mm-hmm.
events? Are you helping people? Are you part of the community that you're in? A lot of stores struggle because they didn't live in the community they opened the store in.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
would they know
Right.
what the community needs? How would they know how to support the community if you're not a part of it, right? All you're going to do is look at it and judge it by whatever stereo, rich, white, people of color, whatever, and then
Mm-hmm.
base how your business is going to run off of that instead of what actually the community. Maybe the community needs a kids coat drive. Maybe the community needs money for the firehouse. You know what I mean? Like when you
Mm-hmm.
understand these things and you're able to give it to them, you're then able to justify why your prices are different than other people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. And I think that is advice worth its weight in gold, to be honest with you,
Thank you.
Todd. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really enjoyed getting to know you, getting to know your company, getting to know you a little bit as a person through the lens of how you're operating the business. And I commend you. I appreciate your time. We're coming to the end of our time together today. I hope we get a chance to meet in person at some point, maybe NECANN next year or something on the East Coast. When I'm out there, we could get together. I'd love to come up
Yeah,
and
yeah.
visit with you. But before we leave, any parting words, anything you'd like to share with our audience after this little mini masterclass on creating value in your community through our running responsible cannabis business?
Just quit being dicks to each other, right? Like you don't have to shit on everybody to have a successful business. Like we can all work together. There's enough money on the table for everybody. We just have to
Yeah.
understand how to support each other in the communities that we want to be a part of.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, man. I'm right there with you. Well, listen again, thanks for your time.
No,
Thanks
thank
for
you
taking
so
the
much.
time to share your story with us, to tell us more about how you're experiencing things in Massachusetts, and just really appreciate it, Todd. And thanks everybody who tuned in, listened to this episode, and tune in again in the next couple of weeks. We'll have our next episode coming out. Not sure who that's going to be with. I actually do think it's going to be with a buddy of mine who, interestingly enough, met him when he was running one of the early adult use grows in Massachusetts. He's now out in Vegas running grows out there. Amazing grower. Hopefully we'll get to talk to him next time. But for now, thanks again to our guest, Todd Dahn, for joining us today. This is Mark Doherty saying we'll see you again on the next episode of Grow Sessions.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.